Well, a very pleasant good evening to us. This evening is Friday, the 23rd of July, 2021, and we're very excited to have with us our usual Friday evening mentor and teacher, trainer. And we want to welcome the person of Her Excellency Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe. Before we do that, I just want to welcome all of our management team. I want to acknowledge the person of our COO in the person of Her Excellency Doreen Barunji, His Excellency Olukoya. I also want to acknowledge our founding partner, Her Excellency Victoria Oke-Dyer, and also Zionist, His Excellency Daniel, responsible for our Franco regions, and Florence Marembe out of Uganda. All of those individuals, all of you who are with us, all ambassadors and those who are offline and online, you're very welcome. To those who are on our LinkedIn platforms, also our Facebook and on our YouTube platform, we welcome you this evening. Please allow me to present this evening Her Excellency Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe, and her subject matter for this evening is strategic execution. Without any further ado, Your Excellency Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe, you're very welcome this evening to the class of Steel.
Well, good evening, a good morning in some places. I bring you greetings. Indeed, it's my honor and privilege to be once again of the class of Steel. I thought about what I wanted to share with the class of Steel this evening. And I was looking at what is happening in the global media when I'm thinking about what is confronting organizations and leaders, regardless of what sector they may be involved in. And Spirit said to me that this is a topic that I should address, as strategic execution is critical. While His Excellency Dr. Steele is loading up the PowerPoint, I want everybody that is joining us, whether here online or on any of the variety of other platforms, is to think about, in whatever areas that you work, when you think about some of the things that present the greatest challenges and the greatest opportunities to your team. You know, often when we're thinking about a program or a project, many of us have sat in rooms and we have talked about strategy. We've talked about how am I going to manifest the goals, the objectives, the outcomes that you envision. And that doesn't matter whether or not you are in the faith sector, you're in an NGO, or you're a for-profit corporation. Regardless of what kind of entity you are driving, no matter what kind of program or services you're seeking to deliver, at some point, this question and what I'm going to share with you in my time with you this evening really bubbles up to the top of the discussions in your mind as a leader, and certainly with those that are on your team. You know, when you stop and you think about strategic execution is critical to what you're actually able to accomplish. And it doesn't matter what you are striving to do, no matter what sector you're working in. I can't repeat that enough, because often people think that, okay, I'm running an NGO or I'm running my ministry in my church, that's quite different from a corporation, a for-profit corporation, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So I've been building upon your mindset when you're thinking about social entrepreneurship and how to infuse that into your faith ministry or your corporate ministry or your NGO work. Now I want you to think a little bit deeper about how do you actually make that happen? Because as servant leaders, as those of us that really want to transform people and places and communities, it really gets down to what I'm going to share with you this evening: strategic execution. Next slide, please. So when you think about how and what you're able to accomplish in any aspect of your work, it really gets down to what I call the execution factor. Because you could have the best strategy, but if you don't have a positive organizational culture, there is a saying in the quality world, in the performance world, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and sometimes a midnight snack. So even if you have the best strategy, if you don't have a positive culture within your organization, the odds of you actually achieving what you have in your mind, it's really, really slim. And I was listening to my mentors yesterday on the John Maxwell team, and we all, as servant leaders and those of us that want to transform people and places, we always are very hopeful. And there's also this joke that hope is not a strategy. Yes, hope can drive your spirit, but if you are just hoping that you're going to accomplish something without having processes and systems and a framework in which to do it, I hate to tell you, but your odds of accomplishing it are slim and none. Next slide, please. So when you're thinking about everything, you really got to think about the execution factor. So at the end of my time with you today, I want to have addressed these questions, these issues. These are the things that I want to have shared with you, or if you have questions at the end that I have answered. And I want you to understand the distinction between strategy and strategic execution, and the difference between strategy failure and strategic execution failure. Next slide, please. These things are critical for you as a leader. I can't stress enough, no matter what area you're leading, whether in your business, whether in your ministry, whether a nonprofit, it really gets down to strategic execution. And I also want you at the end of my time with you to understand why strategic execution is so essential to an organization's success. What are some of the causes of strategy execution failures, and how can you improve it? And what are the things as a leader, as you're thinking about strategic execution and you're thinking about what you want to achieve in your outcomes, you often have to start with yourself and say to yourself, how do I need to grow? What do I need to work on? And then the other part is, once you find out the what, how do I do that? How do I accomplish it? What do I need to know? Who do I need to partner with? How do I surround myself with the information or the tools or the strategies so that I can actually manifest the outcomes that are in my mind? Next slide, please. So for any organization, any initiative, as I opened up with, strategic execution really becomes the difference maker between success. You can have the best laid plans. You can really perhaps have visualized it in your mind, but it really gets down to strategic and your strategic execution of the strategy. Every organization ideally has a mission, a vision. You have your goals and your objectives that you want to accomplish. You have done some work and you've thought about, does this strategy make sense? If I take these steps, is that my roadmap to get to the outcome that I want? What are my choices? There's always several different ways to get to the outcome that you want. Have you analyzed what are those different choices? And then there comes the implementation. There's countless organizations, leaders, projects, initiatives. They have a strategy. It may be a great one, but when it comes down to the implementation and the execution, that is where the gap is. And so after you even start to implement and execute, if you're not constantly evaluating, what have I done? What have we accomplished? What were our opportunities for continuous improvement? How can we get better? Because too often we get stuck at a one point and we may have some level of success and then we say, okay, this is it. And then we keep redoing it and redoing it. And meanwhile, circumstances and situations and opportunities can be changing in the greater environment and we're not responding to it. And this is how so many people get left behind or they become irrelevant. You can see that in countless organizations. You can see that happening when people have really not scanned the environment. They have not really assessed the trends, and then they wonder why they become irrelevant or they're not accomplishing the outcomes. So it doesn't matter what kind of organization, what kind of project, what kind of initiative, it really becomes your strategy and then the strategic execution. Next slide, please. So what are the things when you're thinking about your mission and your vision? What's my goals and my objectives? What is our strategy? What is our strategic roadmap to accomplish that outcome? When you think about implementation in the simplest terms, is really taking those strategies and making them into actions that you are repeating on a daily basis. It becomes a habit. It becomes woven into your business model, your business operations. And it doesn't matter whether you're running a faith-based initiative, whether it's a corporate or an NGO. Often I hear people in the faith-based community feel that they don't have to think about ministry from a business model, from a business standpoint. That couldn't be further from the truth. You need money to do ministry work. You need money to run a nonprofit. You need money to continue growing a business. So a business model and thinking about strategic implementation has relevancy no matter what kind of organization you as a leader are at the helm of. And it's how you implement that really reflects on the kind of outcomes that you're able to achieve. Next slide, please. So often when you think about how am I going to accomplish the mission, the goals, the programs, whatever I'm trying to do, it can be challenging no matter what the sector. And this isn't just something that confronts small organizations, small churches, or small NGOs. This is something that confronts any kind of organization that a leader is striving to move along a certain pathway. It is, and it impacts organizations of all sizes and of all sectors. Next slide, please. So I just want to reflect when you think about it, you might be thinking about your own business, your own faith organization, your own nonprofit. I want you just to reflect on a couple things I want to share with you. So when you think about strategic execution and you think about, what does that have to do with me if I'm running a business? let's look at a couple of things and snapshots I wanted to share with you when you think about strategic execution and the business community. Next slide, please. So Walmart attempted to go into the German grocery market. They ended up losing $1 billion. They had a strategy in mind. They weren't able to execute it. This was the loss that they withstood as a result of this strategy that they had. This is Walmart, and Walmart, like Amazon, is dominating in the places where they have been allowed to come into the business community. They are really game changers, really, for small businesses, because they come in and they tend to dominate the market because of their model. They buy in volume, they buy low, and they make their money on volume sales. Next slide, please. GM, if you think back to GM at one point, they were dominating the automobile industry. And GM, in terms of their brands, their models, the way they were penetrating the market, they weren't able to strategically execute what they had in mind. If you would Google and you go back in 2008 or 9, when the Great Recession hit America, it was then President Obama that they came in with a bailout plan to help the automotive industry. Here again, and we know GM is a major conglomerate, strategic execution challenges. Next slide, please. Tesla came into the U.S. grocery market. They were not able to make a profit, and they came in 2007. They ended up leaving. They couldn't execute their strategy. Next slide, please. Kodak. Well, okay, going back, Yahoo, at one point, Yahoo, at the time when Google, they were dominating email. They had a presence in the digital highway. Yahoo, because of many instances, their email wasn't found to be secure. There were a lot of hacking. Yahoo has lost its share. People don't tend to use Yahoo emails as much as they used to. They weren't able to execute their strategy. Next, please. Well, Kodak filed for bankruptcy January 2012. At one point, everybody was thinking about Kodak moments. Kodak was widely known. There were changes in the way that people captured their memories. A lot of digital platforms were coming in terms of taking pictures. The cell phone, people started doing more of that. Digital cameras. Kodak didn't respond to shifts in the environment. Their market share diminished. Next slide, please. So this whole thing about strategic execution, it's impacted the faith community. If you look at these startling numbers, 2020, 47% of people are actively engaged in a church or a mosque, down from 50%, and it was 70% in 1999. Look how the numbers have diminished. Look at how Gallup has found that over the years that the whole engagement in the faith community, it has diminished tremendously. And it is found that some 5,000 to 10,000 churches close annually. When I look at it, I do a lot of work with the faith community as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many churches and I know this because of some of the work that I was doing when outreach was made to them about creating digital presence, maybe having multiple ways in terms of streaming their services. Many were just insistent, no, we just going to have face-to-face service. Well, what happened when they could not have face-to-face services? Those churches who already had digital platforms set up, those that already had multiple ways that people could submit their tithes and offerings, they were able to continue their churches. They were able to continue to engage their congregations. Those that didn't have those platforms, they found themselves trying to scurry and try to get an online presence, trying to create mechanisms so that people could do their tithes and offerings in these multiple ways. Many of them, unfortunately, in the U.S., they did not survive. Many of them, because they still can't gather, have not been able to pivot and to really continue to do their ministry work. So the faith community has been impacted by strategy, execution issues as well. Next slide, please. Well, what about the NGO? What about that nonprofit? What is happening with those kinds of entities? We looked at what's happened with some corporations, and I just pulled out a few to share with you, but there's countless stories about where strategic execution issues have impacted the leader maintaining their job, and the organization as a whole. I gave you some snapshots at the faith community. And while I use US stats, that is something that churches globally are being impacted by. So what about the NGO? Next slide, please. Well, these are some research facts that I found that said if you just looked at some common scenarios in the NGO sector, that around 4% would close anyway, just because perhaps lack of resources, not having sustainable business models, perhaps being too grant funded, really perhaps not infusing social enterprise. So 4% might end up closing their doors in a crisis anyway. Then they looked at some common scenarios that you see that could impact. And this is all based on just looking at US, but we know that there are NGOs globally. So some of these same scenarios are quite common in other places around the world. So they looked at looking at the total and looking at what could happen, how would this scenario impact the NGO? 11% they found would probably go out of business. And then they looked at what would happen and what has happened because of COVID-19. Another 22,000 NGOs probably would close their doors. Next slide, please. Then they looked if they were being really optimistic. What would happen if you looked at the NGO sector? Well, maybe about 3%, maybe only 8,000 nonprofits would shut down. And then in the worst case scenario, no sustainability, little or no grant money, no social enterprise, really a business model where you just dependent on donations and volunteers. Roughly probably 38% or nearly 120,000 nonprofits would probably shut their doors. Next slide, please. So when you think about this whole thing about strategy and strategy execution, then you got to think about it. What is the difference between strategy failure and strategy execution failure? Next slide, please. Well, it's simply this. Your strategy is the what. That's your content. Your strategy is what are we going to do? What is our roadmap? Just like the GPS, when you're listening to it and it tells you to turn right, turn left, go down a quarter of a mile, and you're going to bear to the right. That's the content. That's the what. But then your execution is how you going to take that direction and how you going to use it. Are you going to listen to it, or are you going to say, oh, the GPS is wrong? That's not going to work. And then you decide to perhaps skip some steps, or you don't use it. That's your how. So remember, your strategy is your content, and your execution of the strategy is your process. That's your how. You got the what and you got the how. Next slide, please. So here again, when you think about from in your organization or your business, you got those things I shared with you earlier, your mission, your vision, you got your goals, your strategy, you see the strategic implementation piece. That's where you think, how does my content, how does my what, how does that line up with what I want to accomplish? And then on the flip side, there's the process. How am I going to get there? How am I going to actualize and make my mission and vision come true? What process, what steps am I going to use to implement that strategy, my content? Next slide, please. So when you think about your strategy and the execution of your strategy, yes, your strategy does influence strategic or strategy execution. And I say that because if you have a flawed strategy, well, it's kind of clear what's going to happen when you get to try to execute it. So you really got to do diligence when you're thinking about your strategy. And at the back of your mind should be your mission, your vision, those key aspects that frame your business, your church, your NGO. This is what should be driving you when you think about your strategy and how you're going to execute it as a leader. Next slide, please. So when you think about your strategy, if you aren't able to execute the strategy, and if you even taking it a step further, if you start out with a poorly thought out strategy, you can't expect that your execution, your implementation is going to be any better. A poorly thought out strategy is going to really affect the performance of your strategic execution. They go hand in hand. You got to have a great strategy to start out with. You have to construct it and think about, what are my choices? What do I do? How am I going to get to the end results that I want? And then what is my route? What is the process? What is the steps I'm going to need to take to make this strategy come alive, that I can achieve it so that the outcomes that I want to accomplish, I can? Next slide, please. So when your strategy fails, this means that your approach to accomplishing the end that you want has some gaps in it, that perhaps it's not well thought out, that there's some missing elements, that the strategy failure means that when you thought about your content, there's some key elements that you left out. And consequently, when you start to try to execute it, of course, that part is going to fail because you started out with a strategy that wasn't viable to begin with. And so really, when you try to execute it, in most instances, all it does is make bad matters worse. So it really starts with having a solid strategy to begin with. Next slide, please. So we have to think about, when you're thinking about, when I'm talking about content, your strategy, you have to really think about what a strategy is. And that's really a choice of actions, outcomes, what you want to accomplish. And many times people, what they call as a strategy is really not a strategy, but really just a goal that it's really not a means to an end. It's really the end that you want to accomplish, but you really haven't come up with a strategy to get to that end. And so when you're thinking about in your business, when you're thinking about in your ministry, when you think about what your strategy is, make sure that you are not confusing your strategy and considering that to be, a goal when it is really not a strategy. Your goal is what at the end of the day, or at the end of the 6 months, or end of whenever the milestone period that you're going to calculate, what is it that you want to have accomplished in your ministry or in your business or in your organization? You want to make sure that that is aligned with the goal and that you are not getting it confused with a goal. And you see the example that is given here for you. A goal is you want to be the number one ministry in your country, or you want to be the number one business in your sector. That is the goal. But that's not your strategy. The strategy is the process of how are you going to get there? How are you going to make that happen? What action steps are you going to have to take to make that happen? That is what you have to consider when you're thinking about how do I execute, and how do I execute to a level so that I can accomplish, in fact, what it is I want to accomplish. Next slide, please. So, what are the common reasons that strategies fail? Have you thought about it? We've all tried something in our businesses, in our projects, or something that did not work as we anticipated. And if we did not do diligence and do some analysis and try to figure out what went wrong, what did I learn? How can I improve? You're really doing a disservice to yourself, to the organization, to your team as a leader. Next slide, please. So these are some common reasons why strategies fail. Well, if you don't communicate it well as the leader, how can the team know and how can they work? If they're not clear, how can they help to maximize it? How can they make it happen? And many times leaders keep everything to themselves and don't share it with their team. And then when the team is not able to, to really manifest it, they wonder why. You got to clearly communicate the vision with folks in your team. Or there's insufficient communication. If you're not giving them enough information so they understand that they are clear on their assignments, or you telling them pieces of the story, that is going to contribute to unsuccessful strategy execution. Lack of commitment. Well, if you're not committed yourself, if you're not clear as the leader, how are you going to get your team to be committed? So, and a team member, they can feel it when you're not really committed to it, because your level of expressing it, your level of follow through, it sends some messages to people on your team. Or if you don't have enough resources, if the resources are insufficient or they're inadequate or that they're just not aligned with what you're doing. These are some of the causes of strategic execution failure. Next slide, please. If you are doing silo work, if you are doing work and your team is not working coordinated and you got isolated activities going, that contributes to strategy failure. If you're not clear on your goals, if you haven't communicated to your team, or you're not really clear on the goals that you want to accomplish, then how can you expect the team to maximize it? And how can you lead if you don't have a clear direction as to where you're going? As I said earlier, if the strategy has some faults, or there's no clear priorities. When you have the strategy, you got to prioritize the work. You can't do 100 things simultaneously. So you have got to work with strategic intention if you want to execute and execute successfully. Next slide, please. If you exceed in your budget, if you don't have enough money, you're not following and tracking the budget, and you are overspending. Or if you have a project and you have middle managers, and your middle managers often are the people who are communicating to your frontline people. If the middle manager is not on board and you have not fully engaged them, they could be sabotaging your execution, because that's who is talking to those frontline team members that's doing the work. The strategy is not adapted to changes. Well, as I gave you some examples that in the business world, but this happened, as I was sharing with you, in the faith community, NGOs. If you don't respond to changes that are happening all around you, you will find yourself derailed or displaced, or either just poor leadership. If your leadership skills are limited, if you're not working to grow yourself, how can you lead a team? So as a leader, you got to constantly be working to grow yourself. And as I say over and over, remember that as a leader, you are inspiring people based upon the mission and vision that you want to accomplish, and you manage processes. And many times leaders, if they are not comfortable in their own skin, they are not comfortable sharing information with the team. They want to hold all the information to their chest. And then when they can't get the team fully engaged, or they're not able to maximize the results, they wonder why. The team doesn't feel any ownership. They don't feel any engagement. They don't feel a part of the bigger picture. Next slide, please. Maybe you have you team members that are resistant to change. You know, some people, even if they know something is not working, they still refuse to change. Maybe you've made the whole process of the strategy so complex that people don't understand it. So make sure that it's simple and people understand it. Maybe the management team doesn't have the capabilities or the skills that they can't maximize or able to implement the strategy because they need to improve their skills in some areas. Maybe there's constant delays. Plans are not met. You're not executing them because you're constantly behind deadlines, because maybe some team members are not meeting the deadlines that you have set. And as I said, the budget is if you exceed in the budget. I can't repeat that enough. If you exceed in the budget, that means you're using resources that you don't have or you don't have access for. Next slide, please. You may have instances where people are they're not clear about their roles and responsibilities. They're ambiguous. So people are not sure what they should be doing, and you kind of have people bumping into each other. If you're not collecting data and looking at what the trends are, you don't know how you perform, and you certainly don't know how to improve. Data is your friend. You need to collect. It could be the simplest data. It could be how many people did we have attend our ministry last month? How many came this month? Did we follow up and see why they didn't come? In your NGO, it doesn't matter what kind of organization, data and looking at performance information is your friend. Silo behavior does not foster good execution, because you end up having as many silos as you have people and processes that are quite different. And if you have an ineffective culture, as I said, culture will eat up strategy over and over again. Next slide, please. So when it comes to accomplishing what you aim to accomplish, if you find that your organization, your business, your NGO, your ministry, your project is not accomplishing, it can go back to execution. The execution factor is critical to achieving your outcomes. In Harvard Business Review, they found that 80 to 90% of organizations, they don't accomplish their strategy because of poor execution. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So when you think about strategy, when you think about the work that you're doing, when you think about your projects, when you think about how am I doing, what do I need to do? Think about that execution does really equal to success. The better you're able to execute, the more successful you are able to be in your business, your ministry, whatever you're leading. But think about this next statement I'm sharing. You can have a great idea, a great strategy, but minus execution, if you are not able to execute, you're no different than the individual or the organization that has no idea. Because if you have a great idea and you can't execute it, you're still stuck in that same place. This is critical because when you're thinking about strategic execution, it really helps you to think about the future of the organization and what the possibilities are for the organization. Excuse me. And then when you're not able to execute, you end up wasting resources. You end up wasting time. You end up having to go and do rework because you got to go back and redo something. Or either you spent money on something that didn't get the results you want. So now you got to come up with more money to try again. Next slide, please. So more and more, the research is finding that leaders, in terms of their performance being evaluated, and in many instances, keeping their job, is really being measured by their ability to execute. There's a long list. If you would Google and look at leaders who lost their jobs, their leadership jobs, because of an inability to execute, it's alarming. Because whatever the strategy, they could not execute it. They couldn't lead the team to execute it. And so leadership performance, your performance as a global leader, is really tied to your ability to execute strategy. Next slide, please. So when you think about strategy execution, it really comes down to who's on the team, who's inside the team, what jobs are those folks, or whether it's your volunteers, whether it's your paid staff, whomever it is what are the folks inside of your organization? What are they doing? And what's being done by your partners? Because think about it, if you're trying to execute something and a strategic partner is not meeting deadlines, if they are not working with a spirit of excellence, if they are not able to execute, that impacts your execution. So it's not just you in the silo and what you're doing inside of your organization. It's also what those folks that are in your ecosystem, what they're able to do as well. Next slide, please. So this gives you a snapshot of what some CEOs said they were confronted with in terms of trying to execute. These were some of the reasons that they shared. Sometimes people say they was too busy or they didn't have the resources. Or of course, there was the poor communication of the strategy. They weren't really clear on what they were supposed to do. In some instances, people resisted the change. That's a whole nother conversation. We talk about change management. Change has to be managed in a specific and strategic way to get it to stick. Excuse me. So when you're looking at some of the common reasons why strategy, if people don't buy into the strategy, if it's not communicated to them, if they're resisting the change, if people don't commit the time and the effort, If leadership is not clear, you not given direction, you haven't shared the strategy. These are all things that can really derail your ability to execute your strategy as you envision. Next slide, please. So most of the time, people that are coming up with the strategy, they spend more time thinking about the content. What is the strategy going to be? Than they think about how to implement it. And many times it's not the same people doing that. So often those that are the managers, they come up with the strategy and they commit it to paper, but they may not have all the information. They may not have all of the implementation insights. So doing that without having everybody that's at the ecosystem to come and understand the strategy, you're setting yourself up for some challenges with executing as well. Next slide, please. So sometimes the manager who's doing the day-to-day manager, they may be good at designing the strategy, but they're not good at executing them. You know, often the manager, or you may have an assigned manager on your team or what, a functioning. The managers sometimes think, well, it's the frontline people. They're the ones who's responsible for the strategic execution. That's not it. Everybody is responsible for it. So you think about it, if you didn't communicate well or they don't understand the strategy and you just putting all of your hope in the frontline people, the frontline people may not work with the spirit of excellence, that level of commitment. It may vary. So you may not get the outcomes that you see. Many times the folks that are at the top of the org chart, they know what they want to see, but they are really not as equipped when it comes to the art and science of strategic execution. How to guide the team, what to look at, how to look at the data, how to track it, how to do continuous improvement. So here again, you see silos occurring because of that disconnect. When you are working on executing a strategy within an organization, no matter what sector, everybody needs to be fully aware, understand the strategy so that everybody can be fully engaged and contribute to it. Next slide, please. Sometimes maybe the organization really just doesn't have the capacity to do it. And so you may have come up with this strategy that is complex, that it just seems beyond compare, that this is tremendous. But if you don't have team members that are able to execute it, and if you don't take steps to, once you determine that, to skill them up so they're able to do it, how can you expect that you're going to be able to achieve the strategy? Or you may have managers who they are able to think logically about how to create a plan, but that they don't know how to execute. And often you find that people in business schools, especially if they have not been in organizations and doing day-to-day, they may have a theoretical mindset and they're a teacher from a textbook, but they don't have real world experience. And many employers are complaining about this more and more, especially when you think about the next generation that is coming into the workforce. Many employers, and there's a report out called "Are They Ready to Work?" And they talk about how many college students come out and really not prepared because they have this theoretical base, but have not applied it in practical sense to know how to use that theory to actually make something happen. And all they have is the theory. And so you got to make sure that folks on your team, that they have not only theoretical knowledge about a model or process, but they also have some practical experience. And this is where internships, this is where actually doing projects and learning how to actually implement. Next slide, please. So You also find that if you don't share the strategy with your team, then they can't implement. They don't understand, they're not committed, they're not fully engaged. And Gallup already has this startling report out talking about the state of the global workforce. And they say that people in the workplace or on teams and organizations only give 30% of their potential. So if you have running an organization in any sector and you have people that's not giving their whole heart 100%, you already are facing some execution challenges to start with. And then if they don't understand the strategy or you haven't communicated or you sometimes leaders say, well, people don't need to know, long I'm the leader, I just need to know. That is not a growth mindset, and that's not going to serve you well if you're trying to execute something. Next slide, please. So you really can find that if you're having resistance of folks from your team, it's coming because they don't either understand the strategy, they don't have a knowledge of it, and they become further disengaged. So as I was saying, as Gallup saying, you're only getting 30% of a person's potential to start with. And then if they don't feel attached to the mission or the vision, or they don't even understand the strategy, you just have people that are coming to work and trying to stay under the radar screen and make sure that they get their paycheck. And they really don't want any trouble. They don't want any commitment. And this has really caused this whole big expansion in HR and in team effectiveness around employee engagement. If you would Google employee engagement, you'll see there's a whole set of consultants. There's a whole set of work around employee engagement. What do you do to try to get people on your team to connect with the mission and vision so that they'll do the work and that they'll give their best selves? Next slide, please. So when you're thinking about your strategy and you're thinking about how am I going to improve my chances of executing what I need to do in my church, in my business, in my NGO, you got to make sure that your strategy is very clear, that you know what the capabilities are, you assess what the capabilities are, and you think about what are the gaps. Do we have process gaps? Do we have people gaps? Do we have approach gaps? What are the gaps that we need to work on and fix? Then you choose how to invest, the time and the energy, the resources you have. And then you monitor the progress. And then in monitoring the progress, if you see that you are not accomplishing the level that you should, then you use a common performance excellence process that you might see in ISO 9000. You may see it in Balanced Scorecard, and that is using something that's called PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. You'll look at and see, what is it we doing? How do we need to change this? Then you put it into action. Then you check and see if you get the results that you needed. If you don't, then you act and you modify it. And you can do PDCA cycles over and over and over until you get it, the execution where you want it to be. Next slide, please. So here's some other tips when you're thinking about strategy. Think about, what are your objectives? What results do you want to get from those objectives? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to know that you are successful? How are you going to measure that? What are going to be your thresholds? What's going to be your benchmarks? Are you looking every 30 days? Are you looking every quarter? What are you looking at? How are you going to structure so that you can accomplish that? And I talked about data. You're looking at the data. What is the data telling you? If you're doing a process and people on your team are not using the process, what is it? Do they not understand it? Do you need to look at the process? Is it not working? Are they doing their own? What is happening? You got to constantly, as a leader, be assessing and looking and look at what's working, what's not working, what do I need to modify? And of course, taking action. You can't wait and hope Oh, let me just hope that they learn this, or let me hope that they do. Hope is a powerful thing. And yes, you got to have an optimistic perspective every day, is what I call hope. But you also got to take action to maximize that hope. Next slide, please. So when you're thinking about your strategy, you always got to be thinking about how can we execute. You gotta think about your strategy, and execution got to be in mind. Do we have the capability? Do we have the process? Do we have the networks? You always think about the strategy and align it and thinking about your ability to execute. And you can't just come up with your strategy once you do your new strategic plan every year. Strategy has to be a part of your day-to-day operations. It has to become organizational habit. You got to infuse that so into what you're doing, how you're running the organization. And you got to make sure and work to get everybody on board. Next slide, please. So here again, as I'm reiterating, you want to clarify the strategy. Make sure you got a strategy that is workable and that is going to help you create and achieve the goals, the aspirations, the initiatives that you want. Make sure you have some valid approaches that can help you accomplish that strategy. Next slide, please. So you got a strategy. You look at the organization's capabilities. Do we have the people? Do we have the processes? Do we have the technology? What do we have? How does this align with our business model? Do we have everything in place? Do I need to train my people? Do we have our processes documented? If you don't have your processes documented where that everybody can read them, see them, then that's a recipe for strategic execution failure, because you will find everybody will make up their own process. And it's not good for the leader. If you have the process and you have it in your mind, but people don't know it, you may as well not have a process, because that doesn't serve you well either. Next slide, please. So you have your strategy. You looked at what the capabilities you need to do it. Then you assess the capabilities and you determine what we need to upskill. What processes do we need to improve? Next slide, please. Then you want to determine the gaps. What do I need to fix? What do we need to? And you want to determine what you need to fix, going to the root cause. You don't want to put a Band-Aid approach on it, because all that means is whatever is challenging you, whatever's keeping you from accomplishing the strategy, is just going to reoccur. So you want to get to the root causes. And there's some tools that you can use. You can use the 5 whys. You can use Fishbone. There's ways for you to determine what the gaps are. Next slide, please. So then you decide, especially with your resources, how am I going to invest what I have? How am I going to invest the time, the money? What do I need to do? And what projects really align with the strategy? You may have 20 projects going on, but only 10 really relate to your strategy that you're trying to accomplish. The other 10 might be aligned, but you should focus on those 10 that are really helping you to get to the strategy. Next slide. Because what you can do is sequence the other ones. And once you get some of those others that are really fostering the achievement of your strategy, then those that really don't, then you can go and focus on them. You want to monitor the strategy process, as I said, and you want to see, is this working? Do we need to change this? Do we need to modify this? This is working, but this is not. You're always kind of tweaking your strategy and your strategic execution to make sure that they are aligned. Next slide, please. So think about, what is your strategy approach? When you think about your ministry, your business, your NGO, do you have a strategy? Are you using hope as your strategy, or do you have an intentional strategy? If you don't have a strategy, if you don't have it somewhere committed to paper, if you have a team, if you are not teaching them the strategy and teaching them, where you want to go, what the strategy means and the impact, you're going to have very difficult times really executing your strategy. Next slide, please. Visualize your strategy and think about what it is that I want to accomplish to get me to my outcome. That's your first thing. Try to come up with a solid strategy. Give it some thought. Let your team think about it. How do we do it? Sometimes you can create a strategy map, and that can help you so you can visualize it. That can help all kinds of learners in your team, but then you can see. And then if you commit your strategy to paper, then you can go and see where you progress and how we do it in terms of actually accomplishing the strategy. Next step. You want to measure the strategy. Well, as I said, data is your friend. You might create a balanced scorecard. A balanced scorecards are a tool that are often used when folks are measuring their strategy. There's lots of information about how to create balanced scorecards. You might not want to get that intent, but you may have 3 or 4 things in your goals, in your strategy that you measure on a constant basis, so you can see where you are, where you want to go, and what you need to improve to get rid of those gaps. Next slide, please. Then you want to think about, the decisions. What do we need to do? What kind of commitment do I need to do financially? Am I reporting the progress so that folks need to know? Am I making decisions based upon that information so that I know where we are, I know how we're progressing toward the strategy, and I know what needs to happen next? Next slide, please. You want to think about, as I said, the strategic projects. Which projects are aligned with the strategy? Because many times we want to accomplish many things, but some of the projects are not directly related to your strategy. They may be support. So you have a small team. You have got to plan your work and work your plan. So you may first quarter work on a project A, B, and C. And then when you accomplish them or you get them running like a well-oiled engine, then you go to the other projects on your list. Next slide. So then, as I said, you align in those projects with your strategy. Next slide, please. You want to manage them, and you want to manage them to make sure that you are executing them, that you are accomplishing the goals of those, and that any management hiccups or any things that you might have to modify, that you're being proactive. Because if you were looking at the data and you're managing the strategy, you won't have to be, as I often call it, being a fireman and you reacting and trying to put a fire out. Instead, you've been proactive. And if you do an analysis and looking at the information, you can make proactive shifts prior to things really getting in a fire stage. Next slide, please. You're going to communicate the strategy. Everybody on the team needs to know this is our strategy and this is why we're doing it and how it aligns to the mission and vision. That helps to get team engagement and get people to buy in and get the support and the level of talent that you need from your team if they understand and if you have communicated this strategy and they buy into the mission and the vision. Next slide, please. You want to make sure that everybody on the team, they understand their role. They know how their role impacts the achievement of the strategy. And you want there to be clear lines of their responsibilities, clear lines of communication, so that people are not literally bumping into each other because people don't know what they're really doing and they don't know what the other person is doing. That's what happens a lot when you have silos, the lack of processes, and people are kind of executing on their own. Next slide, please. And then you want to reward performance, and many times people think, oh, well, if I report performance, I don't have any money. People, contrary to what some leaders think, it's not always about monetary performance. Of course, everybody wants to make as much money as possible, but sometimes a simple thank you, a certificate, those kinds of things have been found to be as much motivators as money. In some instances, more. There's a fascinating book out by Daniel Pink called Drive, and what they found in research that in giving people huge raises, that if they were connected to the mission and vision, even with getting more money, it didn't improve their engagement. And so it's not just about money for people. It's also about feeling connected to the mission and the vision. Next slide, please. So one of the things, as I said, that you can do is create a strategy map. And the strategy map really illustrates where you want to go, how you want to go, and the steps. And it becomes a visual for you and your team as to how to execute your strategy, how to assess your success in executing the strategy, and what you need to do next. Next slide, please. So the strategy map is a graphic, as I said, and it helps your organization because now you can see it. Now you can manage the processes, and you can assess and see how are we progressing in this area? What do we need to improve? What can we do so that we can actually accomplish our strategy? Next slide, please. And this just gives you some samples where you can see how you create a strategy map. How do you choose what's on the strategy map? Some organizations use a balanced scorecard, and balanced scorecards tend to look at finance, they look at programs, and they look at their metrics. So you can make a strategy map that fulfills your need. The strategy is how it's aligned to your goals and your objectives and what steps you're going to take. And then the balance card helps you to measure. And many times when organizations have balance scorecards, they look at them on a monthly basis to see how we doing. How are we doing in our results? How are we doing in our finances? How are we doing in our programming? Next slide, please. So, as you see, when it really comes to executing as a leader, having a fantastic strategy, that can be powerful as can be. But the true level of success and measure of success is your ability to implement the strategy so that you can accomplish the outcomes that you set out to. And it doesn't matter whether you are running a faith-based organization, NGO, or corporate. These principles, this concern with strategy, that execution factor has a bearing to no matter what kind of organization, project, or program initiative you're leading. So I want to thank you for your time and attention. I hope that the information that I have shared is value added, that it has given you some tools and some information to think about as a leader that you can infuse into your organization, no matter what kind of organization you are leading. And I thank you once again for an opportunity to share with the class of Steel.
Well, thank you so very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Defoe. Let's do it our way. Let's celebrate her let the world know that we are here. Dr. Defoe, wonderful, wonderful presentation on strategy. One of the key reasons why I appreciate your mentorship and your leadership and your teaching ability is because you're very systematic and strategic in your approach to teaching. And I want to compliment your your discourse, your teaching this evening has been absolutely phenomenal. You brought us all through the journey and all the way to understanding strategy and how, what, where, when, why. I think you did an amazing job, Your Excellency, Dr. Defoe. And to our international audience, I want to commend Her Excellency, Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe to you. In the era of looking at leaders and strategies and strategists, I think having someone who had to implement those strategies, walk through those strategies, but not just implement them and walk them, but the beautiful thing is someone who was taught them and followed the teaching they received and then derive synopsis as a result of her own experiences is phenomenal. And to be in a position where she can teach them to others is even greater. Dr. Defoe, you are an amazing teacher. And again, the class of Steel is highly honored, highly, to have you on our team as a part of our strategy. Well, let me open this evening. I want to go to our COO because you, in as much as you are sharing with us and teaching others, you're also mentoring us at a different level. And as a leader, I observe. That's why I sit under your teaching with eyes open and taking my notes very strategically, because I equally know that you want us in the class of Steel to reach our full potential because we're going somewhere. And what you're doing is teaching us. So let me go to our COO, Her Excellency Doreen Burunji, who actually is the owner of Beyond the Sky Tours and Travel in Uganda and also based in DRC. And she's doing an amazing work in DRC in the travel industry. Your Excellency Doreen, as our COO, but also as an employee or employer yourself, how has this message benefited you? What did you take home from Dr. Defoe's message this evening?
Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Michael Steele. Thank you, Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe, for your presentation. It was really wonderful. And it really was speaking to me tonight in the way I have been running the agency. The truth is that I would like to confirm a statement that you said that the strategy, the creators of strategy, someone can be very good at putting the strategy down, but implementation becomes a challenge. Why? Because of so many reasons you actually brought out. I remember some time back, 3 years ago, I had a strategic plan for the agency, and it was very good to put it up, but then the implementation became difficult. Why? Because of some of the reasons you said were lack of management support, and then also resistance to change. Resistance to change is such a difficult thing. So as a leader for the agency, we had the training, we went through, we contributed to the ideas, we created them, and we came up with a strategic plan for the company. But then when it came to implementation, the challenge that I had were the heads of department. They did not take it down to the grassroots to train, to get people to change for better. So the strategy took forever to be implemented. In fact, up to now, we are still implementing the strategy. So the other thing that you mentioned was strategy is not adopted to change. So anyone who is trying to do a strategic plan, it's not easy to implement it, especially if you have a big group of people. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of continuous training and mentoring. And you can see results maybe in 1 year or between 6 months and 1 year, if the team is very cooperative. Then you also mentioned that lack of commitment. When people are faced with the challenge of change, you find that the commitment to do it is also very slow. So it is imperative that you continue to mentor them all the time. You're speaking to them all the time. You're preaching your vision and goals and plans so that they can grasp it and then believe in it. So because when you have a strategic plan, then you make people be a part of what you want to do, and then together you can grow. And then also identifying the right people to execute the strategic plan. So you've said it all. You honestly said it all. I've been taking notes and I've recorded, and I'm very, very grateful. Thank you so very much. Back to you, Your Excellency, Dr. Michael Steele.
Thank you.
Your Excellency, Doreen, thank you so very much for your submission and acknowledge. And Dr. Defoe, do you want to respond to what she shared, Your Excellency, Dr. Defoe?
Well, I would say that in her sharing, when she talked about the difficulty in getting people to embrace change, there is a specific way that you have to introduce change into an organizational system, and how you have to nurture it and foster it. And because if you want to get that level of commitment, it does take some work and some consistent work. And she's right; it is not something that you can say, "Well, okay, I'm gonna change everything in 30 days, and we're gonna be good to go." It is an ongoing process to do that, and so having the strategy and being connected and making sure that the managers, those folks that you have that are on your leadership team, that are your messengers, so to speak, you got to make sure that they understand the message and they're delivering the correct message, because they can sometimes, be sabotaging the implementation of the strategy because they are not wholeheartedly with it, or if they don't truly understand it, then they're communicating something that is entirely different from what you intended. So conducting strategy and strategy execution is something that is of the utmost importance, and that every leader must have and work at it to keep that into their treasure chest of tools and strategies, because it can really make or break the organization performing and growing to the level that you so desire.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency. I wanna go into our past COO for the class of steel, and one of the founding members of the class of steel, Her Excellency Victoria OK Dyer. And I think strategy and sticking to strategy and understanding strategy is part of why the class of steel is actually here today and continuing to grow. Your Excellency Victoria Okedai, do you have a comment and a submission for this evening, please?
Thank you, my Lord Bishop, for the privilege tonight. And thank you so much also, Your Excellency, Dr. Anita, for this great information, this great teaching you have given to us tonight. It is highly valuable, and the way you really impacted the information, the teaching is highly appreciated. I was eagerly listening, and I've been highly inspired. I've been highly informed and educated. And especially, I am more enlightened in the strategic approach you mentioned, where you spoke about the steps, where we need to visualize the strategy, we need to measure the strategy, to report progress, to make decision, identifying strategy and projects, that we need to align our strategy, we need to manage projects. You spoke of communication strategy. You also spoke of aligning our individual roles. You spoke of reward of performance. This is highly commendable, and this is highly informative. It is highly educative. Once again, thank you very much, sir, for the privilege to hear from Dr. Anita. And thank you, our resource person, Dr. Anita, for this great teaching. It is highly systematic and richly presented. Thank you, my Lord Bishop. We really appreciate you. And good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency Victoria Okedire. Always such a pleasure to have in the class to cause us to raise our levels, take notes, be observant, stick to the subject at hand, and be very focused on how it can add value to us as we continue to go forward. Thank you so very much again for your submission. I want to ask her, Zionist out of the UK, give us your perspective out of the UK on this evening's subject. Zionist Amaka Curry, would you just give us your thoughts on this evening's presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Your Excellency, for giving me this opportunity once again. And thank you to Your Excellency, Dr. Anita. I found the lesson very informative. And as I listened, I am tempted to trace Dr. Anita, come to her with a page full of questions. Because a lot of things rings a bell, strikes a chord with everything that she has said. And hence the desire for me to raise a lot of questions. However, giving consideration to the fact that everybody would want to speak up, I'm going to limit the questions that I have, or the question that I have for Her Excellency Dr. Anita. And one of the questions is, I've heard everything you say, the strategy implementation, execution, failures, the contributing factors that makes it successful or brings failure to it. Now, this question might sound silly, but you have to excuse me because I would like to hear your take on it. If some of the limiting factors which you have mentioned, resources, for instances, does impact, inevitable, will impact on small organization. Where there is lack of planning, there's definitely going to be failure. But what would you say are the excuses of a governmental organization like our own government in Britain, carrying out a massive project, such as the COVID tracing app, and then having to fail woefully at that? I mean, I fail to understand why the failure would happen in the first place. Though if I spend time to glean at all you have taught us, I think I might be able to come up with why it happened. But there's a part of me that is saying there are big, this is a governmental body. They've got all the intellectual, they've got all the finances, they have the knowledge. Why the failure? Can we ever get it right? Strategic execution, can it ever be right? Be it with a small organization or a big organization?
Well, typically in government sectors, it goes back to two things. The skills and capabilities of the people, that often, you may have large masses of people that work there, but everybody's level of commitment and their capabilities varies. But what I will say is the underlying, and I see this in countless government situations, contrary to what most leaders think and believe, when an organization is not able to execute the desired outcome, quickly the leader tends to blame the people. But research does not support that. What research says, and you see it whether in big government, I see it in some of my other clients that are government, the problem is, the challenge is process. Research supports it's the process, it's the implementation of it, the process. And that could be one or two things. Either in the example that you gave, either the process or the strategy was very flawed to begin with, and the content, the steps did not make logical sense, or the strategy was right on point and they had the process, but they either did not teach it to the people that had to implement it properly, or people were not adhering to it, and they either didn't find out why they're not adhering to the process and make them adhere to it, or if they had gaps in their learning, that they teach it to them. Many times when there's a process, as particularly you find in government settings, they get a little lax. And so they don't make everybody, maybe this department is adhering to it, but this department is not. Or this silo, this department is doing one thing and another. And I share this because I was just teaching a grant management, which is similar to this execution in the Virgin Islands last week. And many of the folks that were in this class were government workers. And they were so perplexed as to why they were losing so much money, having money being taken back and sent back to Washington, or not accomplishing the outcomes. And it was the two things: the people, the capability of the people, but moreover, they didn't have any process. There was no processes. They weren't adhering to the processes. In some ways, they didn't even have policies. So if you don't have a policy and you don't have a process, that's, everybody's going to be doing their own thing. And so I would say what happened in the instance that you're saying is either the lack of process, the lack of adhering to the process, or making sure that people understand the process and that you monitor and make sure that they're adhering to the process. Because that's so common in government entities. They don't follow the process that they have set up, and the leader doesn't require it for whatever reason.
I was smiling, Your Excellency, Dr. Defoe, at your response, because you covered one side, and then you. I haven't heard from you since ages. Just to inform you that I'm going to Kinshasa. Okay, so sorry about that. As I was saying, Your Excellency, Dr. Defoe, you did such a wonderful job in presenting that aspect of it, but you also tied in the aspect that I'm going to address. And you said something very interesting, and I really want to home in on it because it's actually very blatant, and we wonder why. The final thing you said is that a lot of times the government or whoever the organization leaders are, they see that the process is not being followed or is not being working, and they never address it for some reason or the other. And I'll tell you what the reason is. And should I say, humor me in considering, a lot of times we think the government fails. The government never fails. I want to be very upfront with you. The government does not ever fail in accomplishing its agenda. What fails, or what is failed, is the agenda that the people think the government were trying to accomplish. I hope that is clear. For example, if we look at, I'm coming from a background in high-level advisory, and I've discovered something. The footmen do not know what the men sending them on their foot to do are trying to accomplish. They do not. A lot of times, they're just told, I want you to go out there and I want you to move that block. But they don't know why to move that block. They don't know what they're trying to accomplish by moving that block. And a lot of times we are set at a place where we assume what they're trying to accomplish. But governments don't fail. Governments know exactly what they were trying to collect, what they were trying to accomplish, and they do it. In some instances pertaining to what we're looking at, they wanted to create an environment where they can collect data, where they can track individuals, and they were successful in creating that. They were very successful in creating an app that can track and trace individuals. They were very successful in creating an app that can gather data. They were They were very successful in creating an app that had the capacity and the ability to integrate into other systems, for example, Google Earth, and Google Locator, and they have successfully done that. Now, the outcome of that information, COVID just gave them the opportunity to test that app. So as we look at why things fail, the first thing we have to ask is, what was the reason it was created? Because failure is dependent on what was the expected outcome. Failure to the public might be a huge success to the government, but the government will never allow us to be aware of that, what they were trying to do, because if we were aware of what they were ultimately trying to do, I think a lot of us would be opposed to them doing it and would not implement it. And COVID gave governments, nations, organizations great opportunities. Some companies that were going bankrupt, they just needed a good excuse. Dr. Defoe, are you with me? Some companies got a great excuse to bail out and abandon ship and blame it on COVID. Others got a great excuse to re-diversify their portfolio. Others got a great excuse to stop and implement strategies that they never had the ability to implement at the time because of their constant going. So anytime you're looking at determining whether or not a strategy has failed, you have to always be mindful of what was the expected outcome, not on your part. It might fail to you, but what was the expected outcome of the organization? Most individuals, the class of steel might be not as successful as we're looking, because most individuals might think we only want numbers. We only want to have a whole lot of individuals. Can I tell you the honest truth? Class of steel for me is very successful. Why? Because I have almost 200 videos of submissions and presentations and some of the greatest teachers that come on our platform to teach. We have content. Content is king. Your Excellency, Dr. Defoe, is that a good strategy at one level?
Exactly, it is, because there can be multiple benefits, and you're so accurate when you're sharing. In any time when you're looking, particularly at government performance, but for any organization, in the end, what was the strategy? What was the outcome that they wanted to, to accomplish? And many times there is no rhyme or reason, and you're so correct that often what is communicated to the public is really not what is being discussed in the back room. So it doesn't always line up. What is the real agenda? What's the real conversation? And there's what is being shared with the public, and then what's really going, what's going on. And that's unfortunately is so common. And you find that depending on the heart and the mindset of the leader, sometimes you have a leader that is clearly is focused on the greater good. But if the powers that are not focused on that or something, they end up trying to snuff that person out, or making sure that they make that person so ineffective that they are really swimming upstream with a ball and chain on their back, trying to make it upstream, because they are being derailed at every turn, because that's not the outcome that they want to be they want it to be accomplished. So it starts too, as I meant to tell you, in the heart of the leader. What is the leader really trying to get going, and what do they want to happen? And everybody that's leading, and leadership can be used for positive or certainly negative outcomes.
Wonderful.
That's a good point, Dr. Defoe. And I think one of the things that I want to share in the class of Steve and those in our audience, when you get into a position of leadership can be very challenging, because a lot of leadership is very, very, very unspoken. And I want us to be aware of that. A lot of leadership is unspoken. In the midst of your strategy, there are unspoken dynamics that need to exist. They need to exist because they give you a competitive edge. And that's important. Most individuals, when they sit in these kind of teachings, they they lack the opportunity and the understanding of that secret ingredient in your process. You have to have a secret ingredient. Coca-Cola would not stand if it did not have a locked safe with some secret ingredients that you will never know. KFC would never be successful if Colonel Sanders didn't have a secret. Equally, there are organizations and your current organization that needs to have a brand strategy, but there need to be some unspoken process testers. Process testers meaning if the process is working, this is one of the litmus that my process is working. And you need to have those. Her Excellency Dr. Defoe, she is strategic in what she does. And it's unspoken in a lot of times because you don't speak why you do what you do in every aspect. You might share your outcome or the expected outcome, but you don't share everything. And for those who are under our leadership, this is critical. If you're going to be impacting government, if you're going to be creating an environment where you're going to bring about change in your community, the first thing you have to appreciate is that government is opposed to change because individuals come into government with a mindset, with an understanding, with what they want to do and what they want to accomplish. And you looking from the outside coming in, what you're going to be implementing or trying to impose on them is going to be something that they would be rising up against. So the first thing you have to appreciate is that they are going to be opposed to change. Rule number one. Rule number two, you have to create an environment where you show outcome. If you show outcome and not strategy, because a lot of times individuals teach strategy. This is what I am going to do. That's not going to get you success. What gets you success when you're trying to impact a nation, impact a government, what gets you success is this is the desired outcome or the expected outcome that I'm going to show you. And most people will listen to you. Oh my God, you're going to bring 10,000 more individuals to the table? Yeah, that's good. I like that. I like that. And he says, but I can tell you how I'll do that. They said, no, it's not important. It's not important. It's fine. It's fine. You're the best person to do this. Make it happen. But the minute you go and say, I think that you should move this from here and move that from there and put this out there and put that down there, when you approach it from that standpoint, immediately it is going to be rise with opposition. Please take careful note. It will be rise with opposition because most people are opposed to change. Every single person wants results. Every person, government officials, corporate employees, every single person wants results. And if you are in a position where you could dictate, this is what we will do for you, and this is what I will give to you, that's all they want. I say that also, Zionists, to say to you in your question, the government just wants results. The government just wanted a platform that could do certain things and it threw it out there to the highest bidder, to the one who showed, I can do this. And they created the app that did what the government said it wanted. The outcome and the expectations are always different. I want to hear from you, Reverend Daniel, Your Excellency Daniel Sapuru. Would you like to share your thought on this evening's class? And thank you all for being in this class this evening. Again, we've heard from Her Excellency Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe. What an excellent presentation. And she has opened some very interesting conversation and dialogue with us this evening. Your Excellency Daniel Sapuru, share your thoughts, please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Bishop Michael Steele. And I also want to say thank you to Dr. Defoe for giving us this wonderful lecture. It was wonderful, and I actually paid rapt attention when you were saying this or when you were teaching. And when you were talking about common reasons strategy fails, I was actually moved because there are a lot of things you mentioned here that I have actually noted even in the ministry I worked with. So, like when you talked about no communication or no insufficient communication and so on. So when one expects you to carry out something and without giving you good communication, without telling you exactly what to do, obviously you might be bound to make some mistakes. And you also mentioned about isolated and fragmented actions. And this also affected the ministry where I worked because there are many people who would be doing one thing or the other. And even the leader of the organization would be doing something else. So there were no priorities. Everybody does whatever he wanted. And obviously, that organization didn't move fine. So I want to say thank you very much for what you have said. And of course, you didn't stop there. You also discussed something about how we can succeed. And that is very, very wonderful. So you said execution is equal to success. Mm-hmm. And great ideas minus execution, no ideas at all. So that is very wonderful also to me, because sometimes we might have ideas, we might have things we would plan to do, and so on. And these ideas might be very wonderful, but execution becomes a problem. So I would say again, thank you for what you have shared tonight. And you know, sometimes when someone might think he knows something, you know, he knows about something, but when one goes through such tutelage, such teaching, you will find out that you do not know anything. So we just thank God for what you have just said. And we thank God for everything. So thank you, Dr. Defoe, and thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Michael Steele, for giving me this opportunity, at least to say one or two things. And I also want to say good night to all of you and all the excellencies in the house and all the participants. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency Daniel Saputo of Nigeria. I wanna ask His Excellency, our Youth Director, His Excellency Olusegun Olukoya. Olukoya, would you share your thought on this evening if you are able to be unmuted this evening? Could you share your thought on this evening's subject? Okay, we don't have Olukoya open. Adiola, do you want to share your thought this evening? Adiola, you're welcome. Your Excellency Adiola Olukoya, would you like to share your thought this evening? Okay. Olukoya, go ahead. You are unmuted. Okay, I think we have some network challenge on. Olukoya, can you hear us? You can hear us, but we are not able to hear you. All right, I'm going to close this evening's class. First, I want to again thank Her Excellency Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe. And I want to close with one thought, very important thought about strategy. One of the most important thoughts I think when it comes to putting a strategy in place, consistency. I think that's very important. I had an experience where I was taking a drive from Manchester to London, and it was a very lonely area, miles of loneliness. And I saw a car set up selling breakfast, a breakfast truck. In the, please hear what I'm saying honestly, in the middle of nowhere. Nowhere before you get to it, and after you leave it, nowhere. I don't even get what I'm saying. In the middle of nowhere. And I stopped, I got myself something to drink and I refreshed myself. And while leaving, I was asking myself a question. Why would somebody think of going all of these miles in the middle of nowhere and then all of these miles after to just be right here? Why not just go where people are? And it challenged my thinking. It did. And while driving, I remember a man taught me, one of my sage mentors taught me. He said, I'll show you something. If you get up this morning and you take breadcrumbs and you throw them in the middle of nowhere, what's going to happen? I said, I don't know. He said, you see, the first morning you might not see any birds. But if you get up the same time the next morning and you throw some breadcrumbs there, you might see one bird show up. And tomorrow when you come and do the same thing again, you're going to see that bird waiting for you. And then that bird is going to come the next day with 2 or 3 other birds. He said, I'll tell you what the principle of life that a lot of individuals fail at. He said it's consistency and timing. If you recognize that you're going to do something, develop a timing and a strategy and stick to it. Every single day at 10 a.m., you go and you take bread. One day you will have so many birds right there that it will freak you out. But those birds will teach you the principle of consistency. Just go and do it. Don't worry about how many birds show up today. Be assured that other birds are going to watch that bird that flew all that way there and know something is going on and show up. I'm Dr. Michael Steele. I want to thank you so very much for in this evening's class. I want to appreciate Her Excellency Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe for your consistency. You're always persistent, you're consistent, and you always deliver. I want to appreciate you. I want to appreciate all of you in the class of Steel who show up on time. Because you show up on time, we're able to start on time. All of these tenets and all of these attributes are what cause us to get into the realm of becoming successful. I want to give a special thanks to His Excellency Dr. Hilary Emont and Leaders Without Borders Development Center. I want to thank Her Excellency Bishop Comfort, Dr. Comfort. You saw she was online and she was in a vehicle. She's actually in Ghana, and they are on executive work or mission for the class of Steel, doing very well. We hope that she gets home safely and all is well with her as she arrives home. I want to also say a special thank you to those who are on our LinkedIn platform, those who are on our Facebook and on our YouTube. We appreciate you for giving the class of Steel your ears, your eyes, your time. And I hope that the teachers and the speakers that we bring on will continue to inspire you, encourage you, but above all, I hope that you will continue to be excellent in what you endeavor to do. And always remember, because something is difficult to acquire, it doesn't mean that your pursuit to acquiring it is going to be in vain. Always keep pressing for what you're looking for, because just around the corner, what you're looking for might be so easy for you to access. You just have to keep looking. Thank you so very much for being here with us. Good evening and God bless you. Dr. Anita Davis-Defoe, again, thank you so very much. Any final word from you for your peoples? Please, you can do it now, Your Excellency. Where can people find you and how can they access you to get a part of your master class? Because I know this is your public humanitarian give back, but I know you have your secret master class where we're doing a whole lot of other stuff. How can people find you, Dr. Defoe, to get into those secret classes that give the true keys and nuggets that will cause them to get to the next level?
Well, people certainly can visit me at my website, which is www.upshiftglobal.com. I'm just an email away at anita@upshiftglobal.com. And they certainly can find me at John Maxwell Team / Anita Davis-Defoe. I'm just an email away. And I would just say to each of you, wherever you are and whatever, platform, that whatever is in your heart and your spirit to accomplish, it's been put there for a reason. That's part of your divine assignment, your divine treasure, your gift to the world. And everything that we accomplish in this life takes the passion, the purpose, and persistence. So you can't let yourself be derailed. You often will find or think that I've been derailed, or that for some reason, what's in my heart and spirit, I'm not going to accomplish. But I have found, and I've had several people that have shared this with me just today, that they realized in their journey that they were really being prepared divinely for the next stage in their journey, the next stage of their work. And so sometimes you may be in an organization, in a situation, and you may feel that you're not winning, that you feel that you're losing, but certainly you're not losing, you're learning. And that learning is really your foundation and propelling you to the next thing. And sometimes it's not about the people, it's about the place, that your steps have been ordered there because there's a connection that you're supposed to make, some information, something that is going to prepare you for the next step in your divine destiny. So you just got to count it all joy. Stay focused on the outcome, what it is you want to accomplish. Don't get caught up in the process or thinking you derailed, because just because you might feel that there's been delay, remember, it doesn't mean that you're being denied. You're being prepared and you're being propelled, and you just have to stay forever focused on that divine assignment, because it wasn't been put in your heart and spirit just because. It was put there for a reason, for you to uniquely accomplish it. So remember that, and the better you become at knowing your strategy and walking those steps consistently each and every day, and you are preparing. One last thing, as His Excellency was talking about the food truck and out there in isolation, it told me something else that even goes deeper, because he's so right. Strategy does go with consistency, but it also says, as a leader, as an innovator, as a thinker, a doer, you many times have to go where everybody else is not going. It's so easy to go and park up your eatery truck where everybody is. And there's, the competition is fierce. Yeah, everybody's selling coffee, everybody's selling hot cocoa, whatever. But the fact that there's little opportunity out there, because you're the only truck, you're the only innovator. Sometimes it takes as a leader to stand alone. It takes you, you know, that commitment. And so just as all of the birds are going to show up, you know, for the crumbs, when you're someplace and you dare to blaze your own trail as a doer, as a thinker, as a builder, you will be amazed at the returns that you will come for that. Yes, it takes courage, but dare to be you, because nobody can be better at you than you unless you choose not to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Defoe. You see, I see Zionist. Zionist, I'm not going to leave you. Don't worry, class is dismissed and the recording is still going because we're streaming live actually on LinkedIn. But Zionist, I see something burning in your spirit to say, go on, Zionist, you're free to speak. It's okay, go ahead. Class is dismissed, though. You're free to go. But Zionist, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Excellency, once again. Very, very, very inspiring. The last encouragement by Her Excellency, Dr. Anita, kind of has become like an icing on the cake, because I've heard of all the lecture, and there is, like, you're right, there's a lot burden in me. There's been a lot of stagnation, a lot of if, a lot of have I failed, a lot of can it ever happen, a lot of am I really a leader, and a lot of questions. And you know, hearing Her Excellency Dr. Anita come up with this, I would say, prophetic word, because it's kind of, it's impacted hope. It's kind of restored hope in me. I might be delayed, I'm not denied. You know, there's a time of preparation which will then propel me to the next thing. I'm kind of where I am standing now. I'm kind of gleaning, you know, picking up the crumbs, things that needs to make up the perfect whole for the next stage that I'm going to go into. But unless you hear this word from a leader, there's always the assumption that all hope is lost, except you've got money to pay for external consultancy or training, big money, because the lecture that we received today would have cost a lot of money out there, you know. So I'm ever so grateful, and I feel so blessed that the lecture came, but also the blessing and the prophecy and the word of wisdom also came. So it kind of clarify everything and restore, renew, an ailing hope. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. God bless you in Jesus' name.
You're welcome. And one thing to remember, I applaud Joe Biden, the President of the United States of America. Nothing to do with policies, nothing to do with ideology, nothing to do with what he believes. Something to do with he's 70 plus years old and he just refused to throw in the towel. I applaud that. A lot of people are 50 and want to retire and they're tired. A lot of people are 60 and they didn't make it when they were 40, they didn't make it when they were 50, and they think, oh, to heck with it, and they throw in the towel. But I want to applaud any leader that says to those out there, if you look at a leader, always find something worthy of acknowledging. And worthy of acknowledgement is the fact that, you know what, at his age, he still wants to conquer. And in that time when he fell and media might have laughed and joked, it broke my heart. But that is not what gave me the passion. What gave me the passion is he got up and he kept going. And I'm going to encourage you at your age, just get up and keep going. Dr. Defoe is not 15, but I could bet you Dr. Defoe still has a whole lot she wants to accomplish. Is that, you're right, Your Excellency. There's a whole lot to accomplish.
Most definitely, success and sowing seeds of goodness, it doesn't have a time limit. It doesn't have an age limit. And when I look at President Biden, if you know his story, he had much grief, much tragedy. He ran for the presidency many times. But when I look at what America's confronting and what it needs to build back, who better This was divine, and this was the divine season that he came. And so we have to remember that sometimes in our timeline and in our mindset, when we think something is supposed to happen, that's not your due season. So you still stay focused on it. You stay, prepared. My mentor, John Maxwell, is 70 something, millionaire. So he's still writing books, good content. He loves what he's doing. And so much of what he always shares, his work is a calling. So it doesn't, there's not a time frame. So this mindset that, you do certain things or you end doing certain things at a certain age, that has no relevance. You have to answer the divine calling to your spirit and your heart and what your divine assignment. I can attest to everything that I share, from what I share with you about the challenges of strategic execution to even what I shared in my closing remarks. As a leader, you always are wondering, did I miss my opportunity? Did I had a setback? Am I going to be able to get back up and continue? You find yourself sometimes spiritually or mentally derailed, but you have to know that what's in your heart, what's your divine assignment, that the only person that's going to stop you is that face that greets you in the mirror, and that's YOU. And as long as you got breath and life and you have that desire to serve, you can make it happen. So it's never too late. Never.
Well, with that, I think that's a good note to close on. Doreen, you've got another 100 years of Beyond the Sky. It's going to outlive you. And Zionist, if you're going to say, I'm going to start something, you got another 100 years to get it together. Dr. Defoe, you got a long time ahead of you with your legacy. And trust me, Olukoye, you've got a whole lot to accomplish. And me, the class of steel has a 100-year vision. Anytime you can put yourself in a place of saying, I'm having a 100-year vision, it means you're going to be dedicated, committed, you're going to fall down, you're going to get up, you're going to bump yourself, you're going to have people love you, hate you, you're going to have media promote you, celebrate you, dislike you, disgust with you. But one thing you have to remain focused is, I will show up. That's all you need to do. Just show up on time. And your birds will surely be there to greet you, expecting what you have to deliver on the day. Good night and God bless you, everybody. Thank you so very much for your time. I appreciate it.
God bless. Good night. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.